Welcome friends, welcome back to the hangar. Now this is a different hangar than you saw in episode 1. During the process of buying this aircraft, I'm going to be bounced around a little bit from hangar to hangar here at Edenvale because this is not where I'm going to permanently keep this aircraft. So this is episode 2 on our journey of buying Charlie Foxtrot Mike Victor uniform. And the episode you're about to see is the one where Chris and I, my AME, tear through this aircraft on a pre-buy inspection. And I thought I'd come back and redo the intro. I've already edited the episode. It is an hour long. And for a lot of people, what you're about to see isn't going to be that interesting. For a lot of people, what you're about to see could be, information that you're never going to need. But I hope that some people will be able to use what they're about to see in their journey of purchasing an old aircraft. So I shot this entire episode handheld on a GoPro. And my choice of using a GoPro for this is that I didn't want to slow Chris down. I'm paying an AME to do an inspection. I knew we were going to be moving incredibly quickly throughout this aircraft, even though we spent a 9-hour day. So I had 9 hours of footage that I condensed down to 1 hour, all handheld on a GoPro. We looked in every nook and cranny of this aircraft. You're going to see inside the wings, you're going to see inside the belly, we're going to take a look through the engine, everywhere. And for those people that don't want to watch the entire episode, spoiler alert, Chris, about partway through the day, said you'd be crazy not to buy this aircraft at this price. For the price you're paying for this aircraft, it is an incredible deal, even with the stuff that we're eventually going to have to do with it. So, I hope that you can forgive some of the cinematography. I hope that you can forgive some of the sound. And please watch it. I will put chapter markers down below the video so that you can skip forward to see the various parts that we're inspecting. And I hope that some people really get something out of this. So here is number 2 in our series, inspecting the aircraft in the pre-buy. And partway through, we decide that we're going to buy the plane, and we move into the annual inspection in order to get this aircraft back in the air. So, thanks for watching. So, after 2 years of not starting, it actually started up pretty easily, didn't it?
It started beautifully, actually. Yeah. We didn't get 2-3 blades out of it.
Yeah.
And the charge, it's normal for some of the systems like this.
It's sat for a while?
Yeah. It screws up the magnetism with this sitting, and so we just got to flash it. It'll say, okay, north and pull south, and we're good.
And so, here we go for pulling it apart. So, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to pull screws and stuff?
Yeah, you can pull screws if you want. Like maybe, we're going to do most of the annual anyway, because we're leaning that anyhow.
Okay.
And so, if you go along and pull like this panel, we'll lower the flaps down. There's a panel here, panel, whatever. Up around, like you can take this bolt out, this will slide down.
Okay.
This root here, you don't have to take it right off. Get to about here and we'll sit it behind here so we don't pinch it in the door. And then, yeah, just
take these off or take off 2 screws, turn it and put the screws back in, or how do you?
It's up to you. I know where they all go.
Okay.
And so generally I pitch them all on like a cart like this.
Okay.
And then you kind of do left wing and organize your screws a little bit, then right wing and then the tail or whatever. So
okay.
Use that. I'll give you a drill. Forget
cool.
Part or a screwdriver if you want. And this is
cool. So I'll start taking it apart.
Yeah, how about? here.
So this is a leak test
This
for
is,
the compression?
Yeah, we call it the compression test, but a leak test would be like the automotive terms for it.
Okay.
And so we got 75 out of 80. That's a good cylinder. Came right up. Like it didn't take time getting there.
Okay.
So good cylinder, and then just repeat all the way around.
So that tells you the health of the cylinder, the seals,
a couple
or the
things.
rings.
So say we get a low number, right? Which if we get one, we'll be able to show you. And so a low number would, the air has to be going someplace. And so one of three places. One is through the rings, right? Which if we pull the oil filler cap, we'll hear it go. Okay. And the air will come out there.
Okay.
Through the exhaust valve, which we would hear at the
Hear it
tailpipe.
coming out. Okay.
Right? Or the intake valve, which we would hear at the intake hole. Right? And so now we can determine where the problem lies and how significant it might be. Right? So, something like this been sitting for a while. I would expect some issues with the rings a little bit from sitting for so long.
Okay.
But this orange band here is indicative of chrome cylinder, and chrome won't corrode. Right? So if you're going to leave an engine sit, this is probably the best one that's set. As far as the cylinders go.
And so 75 out of 80, you say is a good,
a very
good
acceptable number. Yeah, because you want some amount of leakage, like the rings aren't sealed like 100%. If it's sealed too much, you get an 80 out of 80. Sort of indicates that the oil's coming up and it's sealing it completely, right? And so, we don't want that either. So,
okay.
Just come up. This is if you watch the gauge here, right? So as I come up here, see I'm getting some pressure on it. Just a little bit, right? And then that click is sort of indicating top center, but among other things, right? And so when we come up, pressure jumps and whatever. So we're out at 80 or about 81 there. So that's probably a 75. Okay. Right? And so, which is a good number. And it went directly there, which is what we want. We don't have to fiddle around with it. Somebody made the piston sitting a little crooked or something. We got to straighten it out. So it's really good.
And so I see the numbers written on the. Are those previous tests?
Yes, they are. And my issue with that is we don't know any time when those were done. So it could have been from the 60s. It could have.
Okay.
Does that one have a date on it?
So this one's 99.
Okay. Yeah. And so generally we log this in the logbook so we can look at it.
Yeah.
That's another way.
Yeah.
So you often see them written on the valve covers, that kind of thing. But you never know if that could be a valve cover that moved from another cylinder or it's not the best way to do it. So it's not really a fair test of the aircraft to do it like this. But now, so that's no wiggling. If I wiggle it, it'll get to come back. See, I got it come? Right? Yep. And so basically the piston straightened itself out, and now it's good. Right? And so like Continental says, don't do that little wiggle, but just did it, and it came up. And now you can hear this is stopped.
Okay, so we had heard it coming out, the oil and the intake.
Yeah.
Okay, but now
and now it's not. The intake still is the same where it was before.
Okay.
Right? But the ring. So probably what it was one of a couple things. It's been sitting for a while, so maybe the ring's stuck a little bit. And when I wiggled it, the ring freed up.
Okay.
Or maybe there's a lot of oil on it, and it's brought it up and sealed it a little bit.
And those could be problems from it sitting so long.
Yeah, everything, like at this point, almost everything can be related to it sitting so long. Yeah. And so, and like if that number was to come up and stay at the 50, I probably wouldn't say, hey, let's put a new cylinder on this. Let's go fly it for 10 hours, come back and see what happens.
Okay.
Because we need to work it back in. So, it's kind of a requirement of the annual. And if we have one at 0 and a valve blowing out, we need to know that now. But otherwise, right, it's sort of diagnostic, but it's not fair to the engine to say, okay, well, you come up with a 50, we're going to change your cylinder. It needs some exercise first.
Okay. So what are you looking for here,
so
Chris?
on the checklist, it'll call for inside or internal inspection of the controls, whatever. So I can kind of see up inside there. You can see there's to say that an airplane that's 50, 60 years old, it has no corrosion, is sort of kind of unheard of, right? Okay. And so we see a little bit, there's no major corrosion, but there is some level of, you see the little patches in there or whatever, so a little bits here and there. It could be treated, I'm not sure. Some of the guys don't like the treatments. Whatever. So
what is it? Just a spray that goes in?
Yeah, spray it's just like your car. Yeah. Okay. And then here, so now the hinges, the movement in the hinge up in here. Yep. Looks pretty good. This one is the same, and this guy's the same. There's a balance weight here, right? See, it's all made of lead. Yeah. Right? And because the lead with aluminum, sometimes it causes corrosion, so you just make sure that nothing's rusting out. Rivets aren't popping off there. Here's the rod end. So there's movement in the rod end. Right, which there isn't, it's pretty good. And then we get up inside here. So there's your control. So that's the stop for the ailerons. Yep. There's the other stop. So we make both stops which is good.
Okay.
Right? And then up inside there, I'll just have a look, make sure the bolts haven't fallen apart, or like, so there's one bolt I can see. There's the other one, looks good. And then that push rod, I can see the nut on the bottom of it. So looks all good. And then if we look up, so we can see, actually your picture's better than mine. So we're looking for like, problems with that spar and, and what kind of corrosion levels are in there. So I usually hike it with my mirror.
Well, and so in the logbook, it shows that this airplane had the rear spar replaced and some ribs
And so which wing do we know?
both wings.
Both wings, okay. And so what did it identify what had actually happened to it?
No,
or?
I cannot figure out what happened to it.
Yeah, see,
But
that's
it was replaced after the plane had sat for close to 10 years.
so maybe some birds got in there and corrosion issues or something
Okay.
like that, right? But it looks good. Like corrosion wise, it doesn't look too bad. It's not like there's no real shitty corrosion on it and whatever. So up in here we can see the rear ends of the ribs here. You can see a little bit of work was done there. See how the rivet's been moved? There's a hole where it used to be.
Okay.
So this might be one of the spots where they were working on.
Okay.
Right. And the same, yeah. So everyone will sit there, and then we just keep coming along. Like the lights up in this area. See, we can't see everything, but we get a good idea what everything's going on with. So there's no, like, we got some dead flies, but there's no rust or anything like that around it.
Okay.
Right, lens looks good. And then moving on, we got a little pulley here. It seems to be moving. Right, so check it and just kind of, the tendency for, if the cable's going to fray, it's generally on one of these points here, like where it's rolling on something.
Okay.
So we're kind of looking at the cables as we go. We missed a panel here, right? That's no problem.
Shit, sorry. I am not an airplane mechanic.
So here, we'll just pull one spool and get that off. Gotta get it out of the way anyway.
So I've missed the same one on the other side.
Yeah, okay.
So you're looking for the same thing in there?
So like we're kind of running the cables. Again, we're looking at like, corrosion levels, right?
Okay.
So that's overspray, so that's not corrosion, that's fine. And then like, nesting, oftentimes you'll find bees nest and that type of thing. Running the cable. Now, the flaps, if they're deployed at high speeds and stuff, they can cause damage to the track that holds it.
Okay.
And so I'm always concerned about these tracks. I've found lots of them that are problematic. So when I look down in there, there's no smoking rivets. Like a smoking rivet would be a loose rivet.
So they're working as it comes apart?
Yeah. It's so much load on it. If you're going 120 miles an hour, you throw those flaps and this takes up all the load of it, right? So along the edge of the track, the roller itself seems to be pretty steady, right? The side play, right? So it's harmless kind of thing, whatever.
So there can be that much?
There can
play?
be, see how they space it? It's right here. See the little, and so that one doesn't have spacers, the other three don't. This one does.
Okay.
And so that's what's preventing it from sliding back and forth too much, right?
Okay.
And so the only concern with sliding back and forth is that does it chafe here, or on the other set over there.
Okay.
Right? And so that looked pretty good. Everything's good. There's no movement here. Someone's taken the time to paint that, so there must have been some corrosion on it at some point. Right?
Okay.
It's all cleaned up. It looks good. So someone was fixing it the way they should. The bolts in there looks nice. So, and now we gotta come along again. So now the other track here. Right, everything looks good in there. Again, no loose rivets. Cables are looking good. Good, and we missed one here too. And then up in here, so this is the crank that moves it, right? So, the bolt's in place. Like there's a pulley, and it seems to rotate nicely, right? It looks good. And then up inside, see how clean it is? See that, like, that looks like fairly new skins. Considering how old it is, that looks really good, eh?
Okay.
You can see where some of the screws in the gas tank, see up in the front there, you can see a little bit of corrosion on them.
Yep.
And not a big deal, it just may be hard to extract them later if you ever had to go in the gas tank. That's the line, the hose you've seen across there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fuel vent line, comes over here.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that it's still attached up in there, which it is. You can see it where it goes into the fuel tank into the side. Right, you see it there?
Yep.
Yeah. And so the tank bay's here, and that's just the vent line or whatever. So when we get to the fuel system, we'll have a little look at that.
Cool.
Right. Good. And then the flap itself, they're prone to getting some cracks along the trailing edge here. Right, so this looks good, there's no cracks in it. We got some chafing happen here, which is kind of normal. Big thing is it needs a wash, right? Right, you clean that stuff off. and then we can see how bad this chafe mark is. On the later models, they put like a chafe plug in there that comes up, and it's a little plastic plug you put in to keep it from chafing in that area.
Okay.
I don't know, like this earlier model doesn't have them. I don't know if we can install them or not, if it's legit, but it might be an idea. If the chafe would start to get significantly more than that, where I start to feel it with my finger down, then we might want to put the plugs in to keep it from basically chafing its way entirely through it. And so then from here we can see we're back to my tracks. I can see kind of in there and see what's going on where the track's attached to the rear spar.
Okay.
And it looks good. Bolts in place. Yeah. Looks good. And then, yeah, so everything looks good. This is all pretty nice. And then we'll move up. So the root here. So we've got we've got some pulleys in there. Right? You can see the cables look good.
Yep.
And if we rotate, that one's the outer one, so the other one's the flap. So just like see how they're rotating the way they're supposed to. We can kind of see the cable. There's no fraying we see or anything like that.
Yep.
There was a little step right there. What was that about? Maybe to do with, yeah. See, we feel it right there.
Yep.
Something's going on there. Right? And what I suspect it is a little bump in the track. So let's go back to the track here. Somewhere along, I think we've got a bump that's making it sort of do what it was just doing there. Like they've been flying in that position for a while, and could even be on the other side. Back to. Okay, so here's there's like the wing attach, right? There's no problems, like we don't see any visible, like, you know, corrosion, cracking, or anything like that. You see the eccentric here, so if we wanted to adjust the incidence of the wing, we would turn the eccentric, which would move the bolt, which would essentially move the trailing edge of the wing up or down. So that's our wing adjustment point right there, if need be. Right, the rest of it looks really clean. You can see this red, the fuel used to be red, so at some point it had a fuel leak. Right now, that if it's leaking, it should be blue.
Okay.
So years ago it had one. When I look in that hole, there's seems to be any leaking around the edges of it and stuff. May have leaked in the past, but there's nothing obvious now, so it's good. From what I can see of the tank, it looks decent.
And it's not wet.
Yeah, it's not wet. And the blue, like it evaporates and leaves the blue dye behind, so you just get a sticky blue dye. It's not there. So you can kind of see up into the ceiling there. We can see that tar looking stuff is what they used for anti-corrosion, and some level, maybe anti-corrosion, maybe as much for sound deadening back in the day. So it's just tar. It's kind of crazy. And then here's our front attach point. Here, nuts in place. There's no damage, no nothing. Looks pretty good. This flex line for the fuel vent looks beautiful. So it looks great in here. Really clean, actually, all things considered. There are cables seem to be all clipped in place, and looks good, very good. And then we can have a look at these forward ribs here, and again, corrosion levels always key. So it looks pretty good. And then this is our pitot head, and so like I'll have a look. A couple things is this is a pitot. This pitot head could be heated.
Okay.
Right? But when I look inside here, if you have a look, you can see there's the two wires that are the wires for the pitot heat. So it's a heated pitot head. But
really?
It's not wired for it.
Okay.
Or it's not plugged in. And so, is there a pitot heater switch in there?
I didn't see one, but I wasn't necessarily looking for it. So.
Yeah, it's simply not there. So you don't have pitot heat.
But it could have pitot heat if it was
back in the day, like an original in this vintage airplane, the pitot head would have looked like this.
Okay.
And so and some service bulletin or something along the way, they decide that this is kind of flimsy and not very good, and they switch to this. So they put out a bulletin saying that earlier model airplanes do this, and you cut this hole, and there's a little not a kit so much as a set of instructions to switch to this style. Now, if you wanted pitot heat, it would be, because we're already got a heated element here, we could just run two wires in. One would be a ground. We could just connect it anywhere here in a single power wire into a switch that we would put somewhere in the panel. Okay. I don't know if you're not IFR, if you need pitot heat. My experience, pitot heat, you turn it on to get the bug out of there. Yeah. You turn it on and heat that bastard up, and he walks away, and so you're good to go again. So, but like corrosion-wise, it's really clean. Like there's not, a lot of what we're looking at here is like paint spray, right? And so very good condition, right? So here, now this is where the wing attaches. Here, so that would be your stall warning. See, the wires all look good.
Yep.
There's nothing there. At some point, we'll turn the power on and just test it.
Okay.
Right? And up in here now, we're just looking nothing's awry. So there's some bolts there that hold that tab for the wing. That kind of, you can see in some ribs. On the back side here, there's a small spacer that goes in there. We want to make sure that that's in place. I've actually seen that little spacer missing before. Right. And then move on and up in here. Right. All the bolts are in place. Nothing severely corroded or anything like that. Looks good. Our bolt actually looks too like someone replaced the wings. The wings must have been off at some point. Paint seems to be coming off. Right. So this wing looks pretty good. In fact, it looks like, my plane's 1970. It's not as clean as this. This is cleaner than that, so it looks pretty good. This will wait for the fuel system. So this wing's good. We can basically put it back together. Yeah, so all around. So every one of them could get replaced, right?
Okay.
It's not a major problem right now, and they would actually probably come out fairly easily. So, puller style fuel cap. Seal looks good. We'll do the fuel system right now if you want. And these have a tendency to leave them outside because the water sits in there, that they kind of leak in.
Is there a change for that so that the water doesn't sit in?
They're called Monarch caps, and Monarch has like a mod that puts them out like that. Otherwise, they did change. See, that's a later model cap style.
Okay.
With venting, it's a vented cap, whereas this one might not be. I think that is a vented one. Yeah, that's not vented by the look of it. And so early on they had there wasn't fuel drains, so that became a directive. You got to put fuel drains in all the tank. There wasn't venting, and so if a bug went into our little vent line over there, you would come down, you run out of gas. And so they said, okay, we'll vent the cap as well, which then sort of prevents the bugs from causing a problem. Right?
And it's 8087.
So that's minimum octane. 80, there's some bullet in some place or something like that. If it's 8087, because they don't make it anymore, 100 low lead is in place of.
Okay.
I would suspect on a plane like this, there might be some level of approval to run just auto gas on it, but that's not the most desirable thing. So we've got something's happened here. See, there's a patch there. There's a patch there.
Yep.
Right. That might have been an old antenna hole, maybe, or something like that.
Okay.
Well, my concern about it more so is the cap they've put in there is now corroding, and you understand that dissimilar metals cause. Yeah. So we've got dissimilar metals. Same reason why our screws are also rusty. We've got steel with aluminum, and so it's starting to corrode at that too. So I would be kind of prone long term to pop that out, put a fresh one in there, or clean the area just to make sure it doesn't go too far on us.
Okay.
Right. Why this was probably an ADF at one point, because this is where the front thing is, and then they got the cable that goes to the back.
Oh, to the Yeah.
And so up on the tail we can probably see what was linked in up there as well. So that was probably an old antenna as well. That antenna is not going to be most productive for you. It's kind of old school, so you might long term see how the radio works. It is a good radio, but we might want to change that antenna on sort of the long term kind of thing. But if you go to the Dynon guys, they'll be working on radios and playing around with that stuff, so they would be the ones to maybe put it in for you. Sometimes I've got something on the fuel selector down here that I can drain that. Right here. It doesn't have a quick drain in it, so I can't really drain it. Okay. And so we'll leave that for now.
But there doesn't look like to be any water in the gascolator.
Yeah, and so the gascolator, so that's sort of the question. I've had issue in the past, like this hasn't flown anything. I've had issue in the past where I broke these. Yep. Right, and because they're old, probably magnesium. But maybe cheap low-level aluminum or something, I don't know, but probably magnesium. And these will snap. And so I'm reluctant to take these apart. Okay. And when I look in the bottom of, when I look at that screen, it's perfectly clean. When I look in the bottom of it, there's no sediment or anything like that. We can check this here and see what we find, but probably nothing. Right?
Looks clean.
Looks clean. And so I'm not going to take that apart. Okay. Right? After a year or so, I would say yes, because it's been sitting. Again, we're back to that thing where it says the extent I feel necessary. Yep. I don't want to break anything, and I don't see a point in taking it off.
Is there I know a lot of guys swap that out for. There's a solid brass one.
Yes, and they're great because you just there's a little pin, you pull it. Yep. Quarter turn, pull it down, and then you go in take a little clip out. You got your screen, you blow everything out, put it back in, push it back up, and turn it. It takes a lot of time out of these ones, which takes probably 15 or 20 minutes to get through the whole thing. Right? The primer comes up off of here, right? So we're not leaking around that area, and then goes up in through this line into your primer. I'll look behind the panel at some point and check the primer itself. Okay. Then this is our line back out. This one, and it comes down and heads where's it going? Over there. So see, we got a little bit of, see the loose screw right there? Right there. So we'll tighten up that screw. See right down there?
Oh,
there.
Yep.
See? Yeah.
Yep.
So we got to watch, like, the line doesn't look like any fuel's leaking or anything like that, but we just tighten up the screw. Okay, and then it comes down, following it, goes down to the carburetor somewhere. How's this one prime? Yeah, so there's our prime right there. So the primer fitting's going right into the intake on the left side. Right? And we don't see any leaks through the system. When I primed it this morning, it felt the way it should.
Yeah, it looked like you were having trouble pushing it in, which is
kind of normal. Kind of normal, yeah. So so the primer system looks pretty good. Now the carburetor. See, we got some level of staining around the edges here.
Okay.
And when the concern is that these bolts come loose right here. Right, throttle body screws is what they're called. Right, they're not loose. And because it's been sitting, we don't know, like, whatever. See, but there's some evidence that it's been, well, there's some evidence it's been leaking a little bit just because it's a little colored here and stuff like that. That might be an on the horizon kind of thing, but if the engine's not going to stick around, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. So we've got some movement here in the throttle shaft. Right, so you can see, I don't know if you can.
Oh yeah, a little wiggly.
Yeah, a little bit of wiggle. And see what's happening when I'm doing it? See the fuel coming through there?
Yep.
So it's not perfectly sealed, right? And there is, on some of them, there's a little O-ring in there. So it might suck a little bit of air through there, right? So again, long term, this is probably a carburetor job on the horizon.
Okay.
There's some information here. It's stamped with the V, which means it has one piece Venturi, which clears an AD. Right? So the V, so that's a fairly decent carburetor. I don't see any reason. When we go with the throttle, so that's all the way to the idle stop. There's all the way to the full power, so that's good. The mixture control is here, and so it goes. You probably see it there from your side.
Oh, really?
But yeah, so it's right here, and so the mixture control. We'll just go the distance with it. See, it touches here, and when we go back, I don't want to bend that cable, so I might not be able to do that. Yeah, I got to go inside to pull that back, so I don't want to break it.
Okay.
And then our carb heat cable, right, oftentimes they get a little chafe right there, but that seems good. Right, and again, I don't want to bend. Okay, there we go. So it goes all the way back. Right. It moves pretty good. Sounds okay. The bearing here looks good. The bearing over here looks good.
One of the great things about helping Chris do this pre-buy and annual is that I get to take off all of the plates, all of the inspection plates. I get to put them all back on. I get to look inside all of the parts of the aircraft. I get a better understanding of what's happening rather than just pulling it up to the hangar door and saying, go ahead and do your job and send me a report by email. I'm in here, I get to see everything, and I think this is fantastic. I have to put all the plates back on now. So that's the cabin heat inspection.
That's the cabin heat inspection. We are passed 100%.
Cool.
So a lot of this I've kind of looked at already, so we're now just turning it into a checklist, right? So they're very secure, right? There's I don't see any obvious cracking or that type of thing. These seals are a little hardened, but will still do their job. But you're talking about changing the engine, so it's not that they're torn and missing. Whatever. So down long term, wherever we see a small crack here, someone stop drilled both of the ends of it. It's okay, right? So everything looks good. So the baffles are great. Right?
So that little, just drilling that tiny little hole.
The idea is to stop the crack, right? And see,
so that little hole just stops it.
Yeah, and then this one, if I look through it, see there's a flange behind it, so I can't really drill into the end of that, whatever. So yeah, it just basically gives it a thing to radiate the stress of it, and so the stop drill, which is kind of a standard practice. You can see another one down here.
Okay, yep.
And then it just had a crack, stop drill it, and see it hasn't really gone much further. This it has, but they didn't quite get the end of it, and there's a plate behind. So really
so there's something.
This one looks like someone's made it, like it's new.
You made it.
Did I?
It's in the logbook.
Okay.
I read that.
Yeah, there you go. It's beautiful work.
Isn't that it?
So, okay, yeah, so baffles look good. All right, so cylinders for security cracks, broken fins, rocker box covers. Remember I showed you that one that was leaking a little bit?
Yep.
Let's go and just a quick check tighten those things.
So that is called a rocker box?
Yeah, that's a rocker box. This is a rocker box cover.
And it was just leaking a little bit?
Just a little bit. And so you can see we're getting a little bit of a turn out of each of them. They're torqued when they're cold. And then once it heats and cools a couple times, they tend to cool off. Or they tend to loosen up.
Yep.
Yeah. And the rest of them are okay. I don't want to over tighten anything, so that's good. The push rod housings, push rod housings, that's what we looked at before.
Yep.
The seals, the oil leaks, cracks, and dents, everything looked good. The crankcase, the oil pan reduction gear, we don't have that. This checklist covers a number of planes. An accessory section for leak safety, front crankshaft seal for leakage, everything, I looked at all that, looks good. You know, there's hoses, this talks about the engine hoses, like the one going to the carburetor.
Okay.
That would be the one, and basically what we're looking for flex. And that it's not too stiff and that it's not bouncing off something, right? It's got good flexibility, right? It's pretty free for a pretty good distance, but where else are we going to tie it? You know what I mean? So it's
okay.
It is what it is. It looks pretty good. So, and then the other would be the oil pressure on the other side. We looked at that when we looked at the primer system. It's here. So our oil pressure comes out of the engine right there. See in that spot right there, right?
Okay,
there.
yep.
Follows this line, goes in through here, and then into the gauge. And at some point I'll look under the panel and we'll see the other half of that.
Okay.
So that line looks great. Right, the crankcase vent, that would be a line I guess they consider it. It's in great shape as well. Intake system for security leaks, deteriorated hoses, and loose or corroded clamps, manifold drains for proper outfit and drain lines, blah, 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 everything like that. So that's the intake system. I'll get a flashlight and have a quick once over on that. But I like when I was looking at the exhaust, I was looking at this as well. So see what they're talking about is, so here, like, you know, are we missing bolts and stuff like that, which I kind of already looked at.
Yep.
Okay, comes down, see the hoses here, the little rubber hose there, they all look good. The seal at the oil pan here, right, so it's these rubber hoses there.
Yep.
And see, it's showing a little bit here, right, which sort of is an indicator it could come a little bit more this way, but it's really stiff and not moving. And so, like, why upset it for 1/8 of an inch? I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But that's kind of what I'm looking for, that it doesn't slip down so much that it's sucking air through that area.
Okay.
Right? And so, and then the other side was about the same thing. Like I say, I kind of looked at it when I was doing the other stuff. One thing about this leak here, though, see how they're up and behind here now that I look at it? See right in there? Mm-hmm. Right? The blue, it looks like maybe what it is that the push rod, the push rod tube, the shroud, this piece here, this one, right? Okay. There is, it's kind of, they put in an expander and they expand it into position. It looks like it's leaking through that part in the back. So as much as we snug this a little bit, that may not be the whole problem. When one of the comments I made in the past, people are like, what are you looking for? Because I go around looking at everything. Yep. And I'm looking for RTV, which is like a high temperature sealant. Yes. Because wherever you find RTV, you find an additional problem.
That's that blue stuff.
That's the blue stuff, right? Okay. So we found the RTV. We've now found the problem. Yep. So there is a tool. I don't have it myself. I used to borrow it off my old boss, but you put it in here and you expand it back out and try and stop that little bit of leakage. Okay. Bottom line, these engines, when they're running, they're leaking. To make this thing perfectly dry all the time is a huge expense, right? And for what you could possibly lose out of there, I'm not overly concerned about it, but long term, maybe if we had the tool here and we were playing around, we could snug it back up. So that's that. So the intake system looks good. All right, the exhaust system, we looked at all that when we were doing the heat muff. Yep. Right? Okay, the ignition harness for chafing or whatever, basically, so they're looking for the ignition harness. So that's this stuff here. We're disconnected here because I still got the plugs out because I haven't finished them up. Yep. But the harness routing is pretty good. So but what about so if the $70,000 that a new upgrade costs, I can't come up with that for a couple of years. Is there any benefit to swapping out one of those Magnetos for newer electronic ignition? So I've done the electronic ignition installation on a home-built aircraft. On 2 of them actually now. On the home-built, because of the requirements, they can basically do whatever they like. They're the manufacturer, they make the decisions. And in this case, we have to kind of go with what they say. So Lightspeed, I believe it was, had an electronic ignition that I did on the home-builts. What I found was that this Magneto would be timed to probably 22 or 20 degrees before top center. On the Lightspeed, you would set it to 22 or 20, whatever that number is. Set the timing on it, and set it and forget it, kind of thing. To really get the actual 100% benefit of what the Lightspeed can do, you need to be able to hook it to the manifold pressure, and it will have an automatic timing advance or retard. Right? On the certified airplanes, we can't use that function. we have to turn the function off, right?
yeah.
So no, it is still better. What I found on them, you know, the guys talk about not having mag drops anymore, you know, because they're so efficient. Starting is much better, whatever. So there's definite benefit to it. It kind of looks like that mag. If you pull it up, it looks like a big Magneto or whatever. It utilizes the same harness, if I recall. Like, so on this older style, the harness may need to be like a Slick or a Bendix, a later model. This may not work, but that might be something you have a problem with on the harnessing of it. But we could always, you know, work out something to get a harness off my buddy Joe or something like that. That would work for this engine. Okay, so on our list here, so spark plugs for gap cleanliness and everything like that. We know that the plane hasn't flown since the last time we played with it. I assume that on the last entry, it would say it if I did a clean gapped and tested the spark plug. So there's a pretty clean looking spark plug. You can see right down in, sometimes it'll build up with a little bit of contaminant down inside, or it, you know, actually fills up and chunks of stuff in there, and I would grind it all out. It looks really good. You can see right down to the bottom. Next is the gap. So we're gonna gap it between 15 and 19 thou. So my 15 thou goes, and my 19 thou doesn't, right? So we're gap between 15 and 19 thou. The assumption would be that all of them would be like that,
be the same,
Yeah. And so if the plugs are going to dirty up, it's generally on the bottom first, right? But so looking at the top, they're okay, and we'll just double check that I did them last time.
I seem to remember that in the logbook.
Maybe I might, if anything, I would have cleaned the lowers, not the uppers. Yeah, so the spark plugs are cleaned up and tested right there. So we're 9140. Okay. Right, vacuum system, breather lines, whatever. So we were just looking at the breather line. We looked at it for the purpose of the AD. That's what they're talking about. That's good. The wiring all looked good. We do have to flash the field, right? Because we had that the problem with the charge when we were running up earlier. So that's all good. The vacuum pump doesn't exist. Vacuum relief valve is this guy.
That's this thing up here, isn't it?
That's what that is right there. Yeah, and so what we're looking for is there's a small screen in the bottom that is it, you know, so first of all, it's secure, which is very secure. Whatever, if you look up underneath there, there's a screen, and see the screen looks pretty, yeah, looks pretty clean, eh?
Okay.
So you probably see better in your thing than mine, so, yeah, so it won't affect it. If we start having problems, once we get up to speed, if we see that 5 inches is there, and we're not having problems, we leave it. Sometimes those old style like that tend to stick. I know on mine, I've pulled it apart a number of times just to get the unstick, and then it's fine. So, okay. So that was good. Vacuum system, oil separator. Okay, we don't have a vacuum system. We've only got the Venturi on the outside, so that doesn't count. Engine and propeller controls and linkage. So we don't have propeller controls. That's for a different aircraft. But we went through this when I forward and back, and everything makes the distance. The cables all seem to be running smoothly and everything like that. So that's good. The shock mounts. This is the engine mounts. The vibration isolating part of it. So here, there's one. Right, see the rubber that's in the mount there? Right, looks pretty good. The bolt itself is showing the proper number of threads, right? It looks pretty good. Again, we've got 4 of them, another one here. Right, this one's got a little bit of a crack in it, right? Might be something long-term to keep an eye on. See right there, see there's a little bit of crack in the rubber.
Okay.
Right, but otherwise it seems to be holding on and everything like that. Like it's not, like we may find it when we take that apart that it's not even cracked into it. Whatever, but it's something, we'll make a note of it. I think this one, that one's really good shape. A little small cracking, small bolts in good shape, and then back there, see it's starting to rust a little bit. See along the edge of the case right there, a little bit of corrosion. So we'll keep an eye on that long term. Okay, so the mount, and then the other is the rest of the mount framework, right? Which I've been kind of sniffing around as we go here. So these bars, everything's tight. You know, they're not rusted. Right. Starter, okay, so the thing about the starter, right? Security and everything like that. So there's security wiring and everything we're looking for. So our wiring here looks pretty good, right? Solid, it's all on there. Here's our pull starter, right? Which is kind of a crappy way to have anything. Long term, you get an ignition switch and start like everything else. Look at here. See, there's a crack.
Okay.
Right. This thing is cracked on probably 95% of them. I've never seen one broke off or anything like that, but it is something to kind of keep an eye on. And so, like, if you know, when you get a chance, you open up the door once in a while and you just have a look there, see if it's getting any worse or whatever.
Okay.
This, you know, from what I can tell, hasn't changed. But what I can also tell you is that every other one of them has got some level of crack in that area, because when you pull on it, you hit that, which closes that. So there's a lot of strain on it. You saw how hard I had to pull it.
Yeah.
So long term, you might want it, like if you're going to keep this engine for a long period of time, you may wind up with a key start and push start.
That starter's horse and buggy.
It is, yeah.
That
So, okay, the starter brushes, we could pull it apart and look at the brushes. Bottom line is, we're not required to do that, and I don't want to go into it.
Okay.
Right? You know, so some of these things are just sort of the minimum requirements of that 625B I showed you do not say that I have to check the starter that in depth.
Okay.
The generator, oil leaks, everything like that, we looked around there, there's no leaks, it's all good, the wires are on it. The regulator, the voltage regulator is here. Right? And so we're gonna flash the field. So I don't know, should I do it right now? Or maybe I should Google it first so I don't look like a fool, because I can't remember if you go from the armature to the power or armature to the signal.
Okay.
We got to Google it and see which one's the right way to do it. Very common on any generator system to do a flash like that. You know what you'll see is it'll go zzz, and it'll arc it, and then it'll just reset polarity on it. But like that's the regulator there. The wiring is all like it's original, but it's all kind of bundled together nicely. Down here our connections are good. We don't have any oil leaks coming out. So that's your generator there, old school. You could probably maybe switch that to an alternator, and maybe for a significant weight savings and definitely an increase in your power output. As we rotate around, there's a spring and releases.
That click.
That click. And what it is a spring mechanism that's tightening up, and when it gets to top center, the spring goes and lets it, whatever's twofold. One is it retards the timing for start, right? So you don't get, it doesn't kick backwards on you. That's the first thing. And the second thing, by increasing the speed of the magnet, it increases the power of the spark that's going to it. So it's twofold. Now, once we get to maybe, I'm going to say 300 or 400 RPM on the engine, not the Magneto speed, the dogs move in, and the catches stop happening, and the impulse stops. Okay. So when you shut down the engine, oftentimes you hear it go click, 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 click.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And cracks, whenever we can see where it's been filed a few times, so we see a little right in there. So
yep.
Yeah, whatever. But otherwise, it's pretty smooth. We talked about the need for a spinner, right? Yep. But everything else, there's no corrosion. It's not due for the check anyways, but it still looks 100% clean and great. One of the things they mentioned on that checklist was track. So not to complicate the world too much, we're going to take this thing here, set it right about there.
Okay.
Okay, ready? And then we're going to come around the other side. And just because an airplane doesn't need to be complicated, the track's pretty good.
Okay.
If you think about it, if it was crooked, then we would be like, that one side might touch and the other might come a half an inch away.
Okay.
We could be a little less crude with it and do, we just need something that'll touch, right? So here, we'll run the prop past it. Right? Now, keep in mind the airframe will move a little bit. So, ideally we would tie the plane down and go crazy like that. So see, we're just about touching it, 1/8 of an inch or maybe less.
Yep.
Right? And so we come around the other side. Right?
And you're about the same.
About the same, right? So it tracks perfectly. We take a small piece of rubber hose, like so. We put it on this here, because that's our vent. All right, and then we'll blow in the tank. Oh, wait. And when I...
Oh, and you're listening for it to come back out.
Yeah. And what Cessna suggests actually is this be put in water, see if it bubbles. But I can hear it coming out, right? There's a drain here, so just in case something like ice or something freezes it, there's a small drain there, so if we blow...
Oh, it comes out the drain? Yep.
Yeah, and so that's the next thing on the checklist is going to ask about the drain.
Okay. Okay, so we're on the inside.
I'm curious about that. Right there, see the holes?
Oh, yeah, through the...
Yeah, and through there's several of them. They appear to be kind of normal. We'll read up on this a little bit. What I think maybe it was maybe, did this thing have a tail wheel version? Maybe a 170? Or something like that back in the day?
Well, there was a 170 before the 172, yeah.
And so maybe that, you see the bigger holes? I think you can see them here too. That would have been for the housings for the landing gear. Right, so assembly line wise, this thing probably would have been rolling down the assembly line. They would have had a little list, and they would have said, this one put the nose gear on, this one put the tail gear on.
So there is an STC holder for turning this into a tail dragger.
Yeah.
But he will only do 172, 172A, and 172B.
Which probably
and that's probably why he'll, because everything's already there.
So, and it seems odd though, like a major component, like a structural component like that would have holes left in it. But I guess before they even put it in, that's where it kind of was. It's just surprising to see it. Now, this is an early model to look at. Okay, so other stuff in there. We're just kind of looking around for some cracks or stuff. Yeah, that 625B that we talked about, that are inspection requirements, talk about attachments. And so like where the wing attaches, like that's a main thing that they point out. And so right in here, there's where our wing attaches. We can see the bolts nice and new in there.
Yep.
right? Everything around it looks reasonable. I'll get right in there with my head so I can see if I can look at whatever, but that's sort of what I'm after. Down in here, the other is hoses, metal lines, and fittings.
I see some.
And so we've got a brake line here that's running along. I'm just going to make sure it's not like I kind of follow it through the floor and make sure it's not chafing on anything, right? Or there's some other cables that are rubbering it. So it's right there. There's 2 of them. Right, someone's put some rubber around them so they don't rub there.
Okay.
And then here you can see there's a fitting, another fitting there. Coming back, 2 of them are still here. Looks like it veers over. Where's that veer over? Right there. Oh, that's a fuel line I found. Where'd it go? The fuel line I can see down here. I like to see our fuel line on this side. So our brake line's running. Brake line's running right here. You can kind of see it.
Okay.
Right there, right? And then our fuel line is right. See the line there? You can see someone's protected it right there, just against some chafe. Can you see it in your picture? Right, that's that little sleeve. So someone was, when they were looking at it, saw it chafing, so I thought that was a good idea to kind of prevent it. And we follow along. If we go down in there, we can see the fuel selector. Kind of see it. It's sort of. I don't know if you can look at it with there.
Yeah. So I can see the pulley and the fuel selector.
Yeah, and it's a portion of it, so we can see.
It's there. There with the flashlight. Yeah. There you go.
But generally, so what we're generally looking for is that the hoses and lines underneath there aren't chafing on anything, because they do go across these cables at points, right? And then the rest is like, you know, so attachment of the cables, so down in here, so you can see how it attaches, see down there, right? We may pull this panel right here so we can get a better look at what's going on in there. So that these screws and get in there, whatever, maybe these ones here as well, and then we can have a good look in that area. Right, the rest is the pulleys. We'll move things around. See, there's a number of pulleys right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so we'll, you know, rotating things, see if we can see any chafe points, right? Or any faults with the wires or the cables themselves. Same the cable, I can see the better part of the cable around that thing there. Looks pretty good. Same with this one. See, there's the cable. Looks good. Cables are on the wall over here. So we've got a spot over there. Everything looks good. And then the other is the overall the gear, right? So the bolt, so we'll check everything around this gear housing here. So we got a bolt going down through there. The nuts in place. There's no shimming on this side, or on your side.
Okay.
And then this side, we've got no shimming as well. So the purpose of the shimming is to make sure the wings sit level. So my next question, actually we haven't done air in the tires yet, but does the airplane appear to be sitting level? It does. Right. Like, so what I'm saying is here, we're allowed to have 3 inches. So this is my crude measuring.
Yep. Oh, so there can be 3 inches of difference between each side, and that's still considered.
And if there's an issue, right, then we would in turn put a shim right in where I'm looking. So it looks almost like, you know, without measuring it, like 3 inches would be quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure we're okay. The other is we should do air in the tires before we really
Okay.
do it. It won't affect it so much the way it flies, it's more the way it taxis around. It'll be hanging on one side all the time.
Yep.
And the fuel will all want to come to one side all the time, and you know, so it introduce other various problems. So the other issue is the gear leg itself is held in by a U-bolt.
Yep.
And Cessna actually recommends replacement of this U-bolt every 10 years. You know, again, the regulations don't require us to do it. And so I try and get a good look at it every time and just make sure, is it rusting or anything like that? Because I can only see a little portion of it here. But, so right there. So both sides, it looks clean and new and everything. Can you see it from your side?
I can see just a little bit.
Yeah. So see, like it's right down, and it's basically a U-bolt that comes up. here, down under the leg, and then back up here. Right? And so, and that U-bolt, I've seen where they're broken before.
Okay.
And the gear like actually pounding back and forth inside there. And so, and like I say, Cessna recommends 10 years, so we at least got to get a look at it. If we're not going to replace it like they suggest, we should make sure it doesn't get rusty and crappy and everything like that. So this one's not as nice as the other. The other one's perfectly clean and right there. This one's got a slight, where'd it go? Just a slight amount of little surface corrosion on it, like just a little wee spot, looks like a couple freckles kind of thing. It's fine. So, and then the rest is how those castings are they cracked or that type of thing.
I was expecting more dirt under the floor.
Yeah, and it's actually not bad. You're right. Like I've had some, especially in the last couple months, I've gone back and cleaned so much shit out of the back there. One guy came in and had a water line 2 inches up the side because of the grime and stuff that was in there was preventing all the drains from working and whatever. So you go find this little Cessna 150, you probably had 200 pounds of like half as useful load in there in water. So like it's someone trying to, you know, to protect the line. So you're right, 98. Isn't that the year that the Lega did all the repairs and stuff?
Yeah.
And that's when we kind of think it came back to life after that long layup. And everything looks good though. You can see here now. You're heading close to the bolt right there and you see it.
Yeah.
Looks good, looks good. The cabling here all looked good. I agree with you on the dirt. Like we could like see here like this. I would say we give it a little backing. I think it's the backing of the carpet.
Oh yeah, yeah. So what you're telling me is that from a pre-buy standpoint, this plane is...
It's good. It's great. Yeah.
Okay.
And the price is right. I think he's being more than fair about it.
Okay.
And we've got no major snags at all. The spinner I think is something significant that we should deal with for kind of pre-flight kind of thing. But everything else is just small snags, not the fact that a nav light lens is cracked. It's only cracked. It's still on there. It's good. So I don't see anything that jumps out and says, "Oh, we better look after this right away," kind of thing.
So the only real snag is the fact that it doesn't have a spinner, which is probably about a $2,000 worth of parts, and the time to take the prop off and
back on.
and put it back on. So
we'll clear a few little things on as we go. But I talked about the pulleys are jammed up. So we'll, as I go back together, I'll lube them up.
A little bit of lubing and that.
Yeah. We're right up to date on our ADs. The seat stop kit we can do down the road. We've got to get that charge system working 100%, but I'm certain that I can make it work easily.
Okay.
Right? The interior, that's some long-term stuff for you as the owner, and you're well within what the plan was for the plane. So, vroom.
So for 20,000 Canadian dollars, I think I have myself a Cessna 172B. So we can roll this right into the annual then tomorrow and finish it?
Yeah.
Cool. So come on back tomorrow and we will be doing an annual on this aircraft, or finishing up the annual, because most of the pre-buy stuff goes towards the annual, doesn't it?
It does, and we were sort of a plan the whole time that we were going to roll this into an annual, and so I've been playing annual right from the get kind of thing, and with a few additional things. Like normally I wouldn't do, we went right through his directives.
Yep.
Normally on an inspection, it's not my responsibility to do it. My responsibility right now is that you don't get ripped off on a purchase. And so we do a little bit extra. Normally I would do what I know is recurring and just do a quick check on them. So we went a little more in-depth there. We've been a little more in-depth in a few other things and stopped to talk about a lot of things. So normally winging through this, but yeah, we're well along. We're mostly reassembly and some final touches. And yeah, by midday tomorrow, I think we got her back running again. Cool. And we'll have to, maybe we'll make a note logbook regarding the spinner, but the rest of it is, I think we could fly. We'll see how the weather goes.
Cool.
We'll talk to Jeff about that.
Okay, so I'm going to put some inspection plates back on, and we will see you here next week for the finishing of the annual and maybe a test flight if the weather cooperates. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.